We have a do now today to warm up our brain. So I want you to pause the video, write this down on your piece of paper or in your notes to fill in the blanks for numbers 1 through 3, and then answer the questions or complete the directions for numbers 4, 5, and 6. Warm up those brains and play back the video when you are ready to check your answers. You're back. Please check your work. Those first ones were some math facts. Number 4 was interesting. It said which product was from numbers 1 through 3 is a square number. I thought it was interesting to have that math vocabulary, product. So you had to think of the answers to the facts you were doing. So your only choices were 81, 32, or 21, and we know it was 81 because it's 9 times 9, a number times itself, square number. Finally, the factors and multiples was interesting because I told you sometimes the common mistakes fourth graders make is mixing up those two vocabulary terms. Remember, the factors are the numbers being multiplied, and then the multiples are the products of that number and a given whole number. One thing that always helped me is when I hear factors, I think rainbow method. When you hear factors, you think rainbow method. One more time, say it with me. When you hear factors, think rainbow method. That helps me keep those two terms straight. Now today, we are going to talk about multiplicative comparisons. Say that phrase, please. Multiplicative comparisons. It means we're going to be comparing numbers and doing so with multiplication. Let's look at this first one. 18 is 3 times as much as 6. Record this as an equation. Whenever you hear equation, we know it's going to have an equal sign, right? And now what we're going to do is just translate these words into math symbols. Not too bad, right? So we start with 18 because it told us 18 that means it's going to be equal 3 times as much as 6, 3 times 6. Beautiful. And if we wanted to draw this, right, we could have one box that represents 3. And then below that, if we did the 3 6 times, right? So we'll put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, these are not equal. I was getting a little sloppy here. But then if we did that same group of 3 6 times, we would get to 18. 18 total. So this one's showing 3, this one's showing 18, right? Let's do number 2. Now we got we got an unknown. Now it says, what number is 4 times as many as 6? And it asks you for an equation with unknown. Now an unknown is going to be a letter or a symbol that you use to represent some number. So in this case, it says what number? I'm going to use a question mark for that. So I would put question mark is equals 4 times as many as 6, 4 times 6. I could draw this, right? I could draw, so 4 times as many as 6. So I'm going to draw my 6. Maybe I make a little box that represents 6. And if I did that 4 times, 2, 3, 4 total times, 6, 12, 18, 24 total. And you probably saying, I knew that 4 times 6 was 24. Good for you. Got to get those basic facts down. So our answer, we're going to say that the question mark equals 24. This is how we're being real mathematicians right now. Instead of just writing 24 as our answer, we're taking our unknown and saying it equals 24. So we've truly solved this equation. That's the sign of an excellent mathematician. Let's do this next one. 20 is 5 times as much as what number? Now we're getting even a little trickier here. We still have an unknown, and now one of the unknowns is our factor. Last time the unknown was just our product, so it was pretty easy. You knew your fact. This time it'll be a little bit trickier, although you might have figured this out already. So let's say this time for a number, we're going to call it n. And you can pick any letter or symbol. I'm just picking the N because it says number. But we did a question mark before. You could do the first letter of your name. You could even do a smiley face symbol if you wanted. That you're allowed to use different symbols. Most commonly, mathematicians will use a letter that represents something that kind of relates to what you're talking about in the problem. Let's go ahead and do this. So we're going to say 20 is 5 times as much as some number n. Okay, so now we have to figure out what times 5 would bring us back to 20. This is just like you were doing in the do now warm-up, right? What factor would go here? 4. And I'm going to be a real mathematician. I'm going to write n equals 4. Not just write 4, n equals 4. I'm showing I solved for my unknown. Guess what? You just did algebra. A lot of people don't do algebra until high school. You just did it in 4th grade. You rock. Let's keep going. Now we're going to take those multiplicative comparisons, put them into word problems. So we still have our normal steps to problem solving when we have a word problem, but this time when we make a plan, part of your plan has to be to pick a letter to represent your unknown and to write an equation with that unknown. Number 1, Antonio Brown scored 4 fantasy points. Odell Beckham Jr. scored 6 times as many points. How many points did Beckham score? So first we need our equation. Hopefully we have some football fans out there. Odell, now he had a good weekend for the Browns, or good week for the Browns last week. Anyway, I don't know, we might have some fantasy football players in the audience. How many points did Beckham score? Let's get back to the algebra. So we want to come up with an equation with a known. Equation means we know we're going to have our equal sign. And we said part of our plan is going to be to pick a letter to represent our unknown. So in this case, it wants to know how many points. So I'm going to pick the letter P for points. So now let's write this equation that would describe the situation. Antonio Brown scored 4 fantasy points, and then Odell scored 6 times as many, sorry. And that's going to equal the points, P. And so our answer, 6 times 4, is P equals, right, like a true mathematician, P equals 24 points. Now that it's a word problem, we also have to include our units there. Let's try number 2. In a basketball game, Elizabeth scored 15 points against her brother. Her brother only scored 5 points. How many times as many points did Elizabeth score compared to her brother? Let's underline the question. How many times as many points did Elizabeth score compared to her brother? Now, this is going to be interesting. Last time we were just finding how many points. This time we're finding how many times as many points. So maybe I'll pick the letter N because this is just going to be a number of times. Or maybe you wanted to pick the letter T for times. But this is how many times as many. We're not actually finding her number of points. So let's read it. Elizabeth scored 15 points. We were given how many points she scored. And we know that equals, her brother scored only 5 points. Her brother's times some unknown. I wrote N for a number. You might have chosen a different letter. That's fine too. So now, what factor would go there? 5 times what equals 15? You might be saying you already knew that. N equals 3. And then how am I going to answer this question? The question said how many times as many points? Would I write 3 points? No, you're going to write 3 times as many. So really be aware as you solve these problems today, whether you want your unknown to be the product, the final answer, or whether your unknown is going to be one of the factors in the equation. Sometimes people find these a little trickier if the unknown is one of the factors. But as long as you really read the problem carefully and think through how you're going to translate that into math symbols, you will be all set.